The pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
6:03.
Could we take a moment of silence for the loss of a retired police officer?
Jim Kyleman.
Yes, let's go ahead. Sorry.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Carnahan. I'm unaware. Mr. Niemeyer, was that you?
No. That's me, I'm here.
All right. You're better looking in person. All right, we're going to do roll call here.
Mr. Viv,
Here.
Mr. Burnham,
Present.
Mr. Spencer,
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer,
Present.
Ms. Haskell is currently absent, Mr. Smith is absent, Mr. Carnahan,
Here.
Mr. Everly,
Present.
Mr. Austin is currently absent, Ms. Amber, here, Ms. Abernathy, here.
All right, Ms. Abernathy, good to have you with us here this evening. All right, we are going to start out with our presentation of our Explore Everyday Community Recognition. Ms. Gorman?
Yes.
Come on forward.
Step up to the podium.
So grocery stores are near and dear to my heart. I didn't grow up in this area, so I had the privilege of Walter, Stratton, until up in Sheboygan it was the Piggly Wiggly, which is typically found down south.
I would love to work for a Piggly.
It was highly formative, I think. I started as a bagger, then I worked my way up to a cashier, and before I know it, they could have let me become the manager, but instead I moved to Chicago and I went to law school. But they let me come back on my Christmas breaks.
I started as a bagger and I worked all the way up to the quarter after.
Yeah, no, it was good stuff. And to this day, what I really appreciate is jazz music, because of the background music, at least, that Mr. Wiggly that owned it up there, Mr. Blattner's, would make us listen to. So now my daughter is now playing the saxophone. So
Wow.
just park at that. But enough about me.
Always.
You know, if my wife was here, she'd throw something at me. So we started, Amy, about a year and a half ago, a recognition of folks who invest in town, whether it's corporations, whether it's bigger businesses, whether it's smaller businesses, those who have made significant investments in this town. I think we've held off for too long on Stratton Van Til. I remember when I first started dating my bride many moons ago, coming through the area, and it was just a desolate field back there with a decrepit building. And to see what has developed over there is significant. When we talk of anchor pieces, the building and the company that you work for has definitely become an anchor in this community. And I smile every time I go through a checkout line and I see their youngsters now to me. The youngsters working after hours, you know, late evenings. It brings a smile to my face to see the job they're giving there, as well as many others. So what we'd like to do is extend to you a token of our appreciation for the investment and the fine folks that work with your store. If you can commend them, pass along that recognition to all of those employees, or pat on the back as much as you can. And we just like to say thank you on behalf of the Redevelopment Commission. Express that we're here for businesses here in town. It's our goal then tonight to take a picture and put that on our website. We continue to put out good vibes as to the good things that Stratton Van Til is doing. So we just want to present that to you this evening, say thank you.
And she's got something to say too.
See if you
I
have
was just
anything
going
to
to
say
give a little
as
bit
well.
of history of the Stratton Van Til supporting the community. They are proud to care for the local community by supporting many of the organizations and the causes that are dear to them. We believe that being a partner means being active and involved in projects that make a difference, whether it's helping feed the hungry, supporting local schools, organizing fundraising events, and sponsoring local events. There are many great organizations doing so many great things, and we are proud to help wherever we can. If anybody needs more information as far as helping an organization, please stop by the store and see myself or request a donation form, and we'll get that turned in. So supporting business means a lot to us, and that's why we can count on us to always support our local communities we serve. So.
Thank you, and I know you folks have made a lot of new investments even in the last year to the exterior of the building, it looks like. We have
Yeah.
improvements, not beyond what was already there. How many employees
And currently in my store, total company.
in?
I know total company is over like 3,000, and my
Okay,
store's
how
a
much is
little over,
locally?
little over 100, which is kind of low, but.
Okay,
And the store opened May 16th of 2013. And their then CEO, Dave Wilkinson, had a ribbon cutting ceremony, and I had cut the ribbon with them on behalf of the chamber.
very good, very good. Any comments from the commission? Mr. Niemeyer?
I'd just like to say thank you for everything you guys have brought to the community. I was, there in a hard hat when ground was broken. So, it's great to see what's kind of built around Strax now, and you guys were the anchor that we envisioned back then. Things are now coming to fruition, and, we're seeing the entire area kind of fill out into this commercial hub, and it was thanks to the investment of Strachan, Van Til, and Cedar Lake, and believing in us, and, I think the community has repaid you as well, so thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Along those lines, community repays you. Look, obviously, coming home, my wife and I, and we're looking at your parking lot is, wow, there's a lot of people at Strax today. Wow, there's a lot, it's constant. And, that's good to see our local businesses doing good. But I also gotta make a comment about how many different, organizations and events that your company has supported and donated to. I think Trunk or Treat, you got something coming on, if I could be, I might be wrong there, but you guys have constantly helped out the communities, and, that's nice that you can do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, ma'am, well, as a token of our thanks, we've got a letter here for you, and Explore Everyday Community Recognition Form. I'm not sure if tolerance is getting close with COVID and all, but sometimes we take pictures with folks. If not,
Fine.
you let me know.
No,
All right.
Go get in it today. Since we're short people.
It's all good.
It's not allowed at work, so I gotta wear it at work, so I figured.
There's a blur face out with the, there's a picture here.
Yeah.
Yeah, get a little closer on, can fit in the picture here.
All right.
Probably, Bob, let's see if I can zoom around here. There we go. I got it.
Ready? On three. 1, 2, 3. Got it. Thank you.
All right.
Is it good?
Yeah.
That's good.
Do I need to approve it?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Amy,
much.
appreciate it.
I appreciate it, thank you.
And in case you didn't see, I was smiling.
We'll Photoshop you in, Randy.
Thanks.
Thanks, Amy.
And Photoshop me as somebody else.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good stuff. I always love a good grocery store. All right, consent agenda. We got approval of September 20, 2021 meeting minutes and claims fund 404 in the amount of $871.01. And fund 804 in the amount of $27,508.25. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Eric made a motion. Is there a second?
Doug makes the second?
Doug makes the second. Let's have discussion. Mr. Everly, any comments on any of the invoicing that we have received? All in good order?
All in good order, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Niemeyer, any comments on those two?
No, sir.
All right, then we'll do roll call, please.
Mr. Spencer?
Yes.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Burnham?
Yes.
Mr. Viss?
Yes. All right, that passes 4-0 with flying colors. New business, Explore Everyday Community Recognition Nomination. Awesome. We've got Miss Abernathy. Is this a list that you've compiled?
No, sir. I'm thinking that was compiled by the other Miss Abernathy.
Got it.
Is that
All right.
the ones that we've already?
Yes, we've got an Explore Everyday list of recipients. That's awesome. Do we have any suggestions for this month, or do we want to take a brief hiatus?
I would like to find one for this month and figure hiatus on December.
Okay.
But, I know, we used Strack last month, so,
Mhm.
anything that pops out of.
Not that I can think of right now, and our recipients are usually people that have been in the community for a while, right?
One of those that have recently invested into the community.
Did we mention Rise and Roll?
Yeah, we did them.
We already did them?
There goes our treats.
We already did Rise and Roll?
No, we did not do Rise and Roll.
We didn't?
No,
I thought we did.
They're not on the list.
No.
no, that would be my recommendation. I mean,
Hey, Eric, if you wanna add to that recommendation that if it's seconded and voted on favorably, to nominate them, that they have to bring in samples? Maybe some cookies, donuts, maybe a piece of pie or two, something like that?
I think as long as it's under $25, Randy, it's okay.
You betcha.
The other one that does come to mind, it's a bit off the beaten path perhaps, and it's not a business, but I think they contribute significantly to the community, is to find folks at our local library. I think they're one of the best branches in all of Lake County. It'd be a bit unusual,
Yeah.
but in a way they do contribute to ongoing growth of business in the community with the education they provide there, but that's just a suggestion for the future.
So then we'd have two, we have one for November, and then one for December. I don't, it doesn't matter to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think both do a fine job.
All right, any motions?
Well, I made a motion for Rise and Roll.
All right, so we got Rise and Roll, is there a second?
Second.
All right,
Second.
okay,
2 seconds.
roll call.
Mr. Spencer,
Yes.
Mr. Niemeyer,
Yeah.
Mr. Burnham,
Yes.
Mr. Viss,
Yes. All right. Ms. Abernathy, then we will collaborate and work together to get that invitation out. Next we have for new business, TIF analysis 2021 for 2022. Mr. Everly, do you want to talk us through that, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we received the spreadsheet from the county auditor's office regarding our list of properties in our TIF district. And this is one of 2 or 3 reasons why Corby and Buzz are on the Zoom with us, in the meeting with us. I can tell you that when I was in a previous community, we hired a professional service, it was actually UMBAW at the time, to review that list of properties for us to make sure that we were getting proper credit for all of the properties within our TIF district. I talked to Corby briefly about this and asked if he might be interested in taking this on for us and sending us a proposal to consider for that kind of review, just to make sure that we're getting properly credited. So with that, if you don't mind, Corby, do you have any comments about that?
You want me to take a shot here, Corby?
Yeah, go ahead, Buzz, you've got more experience here than I do.
Looking over the spreadsheet for 21, page 22, and while overall you're capturing the majority of the growth in the area, there are some parcels that are losing increment. I haven't analyzed each parcel in particular, but it looks like they're restoring losses. There's about $3.7 million of loser parcels, if you will, where we're actually losing increment. And I'm thinking that, we need to look deeper and see, if they're residential parcels, we ought to just get rid of those, write them out, because residential parcels will not help our tax increment, but it can hurt us. If they lose assessed value, then those losses count against us. There's about 2,000 lines on the spreadsheet, but there's probably, if you divide that by 3 or 4, there's probably about somewhere between 600 and 700 parcels, I'm guessing, that are in the TIF area. You're losing about, assuming that, we can restore, you know, those losses from, you know, if in fact those are residential parcels pulling us down, you know, it's costing us about $98,000 in potential lost TIF revenue. But it looks like we've got about close to $1.5 million, just taking the $2.64 rate, that's total tax rate times the captured AB. Next year, it looks like we'll get somewhere between $1.4 million and $1.5 million. Is that, Corby, is that about what they're getting today?
Yeah, that sounds about right. It might even be a little bit more now.
Okay.
I'd have to go look at some of the figures, but yeah, it's in line.
There are definitely parcels that are dragging it down some. I've seen a lot worse, but, you know, you still have a lot of growth in your TIF area that you are capturing, but, it's probably worth digging a little deeper on some of these parcels and what we call is taking your TIF map and making Swiss cheese out of it. We put holes in the map by writing out certain parcels that we don't think will ever contribute to, you know, our tax increment. And if we write those out, then that'll maximize our, you know, the TIF revenue that we can generate. So, yeah, there's potentially, you know, a loss of about, you know, $95,000 of tax increment if we could get rid of some of those parcels that are losers. Now, you have to go through pretty much the same procedure to write out parcels as you do to write them in. But we just need to look a little deeper into who they are, and maybe consult with some of you all that know whether or not there's potential for anything to ever happen positively in some of those parcels. But I would say getting rid of as many of the residential parcels as possible, and particularly ones that are losing increment. The residential TIF parcels will never help you, but they can hurt you.
What about, businesses appealing their tax rate? I know Myers up in this area has hurt a lot of communities with getting their rate dropped. And Walgreens and CVS, I heard, we're going to do the same thing. Do we have any of that actually happening in Cedar Lake?
That's an excellent, you know, I haven't looked at the names of each of these specific ones, but I'm sure that could be happening. In fact, there's let's see, I guess we're not losing on that. I just was looking at a church here that had a big negative number, but I don't think it's not being restored back. It's just adjusted out. But I'm looking at the restored loss column, and there's about 3.7 million of lost, you know, parcels that have lost, $3.7 million of total lost AB in that restored loss column, and, you know, that would equate up to a little over $95,000 a year. And we just have to look at each one to see, you know, if they're residential parcels that are being devalued, we want to get rid of those for sure. Here's one that's Lake County Trust Company. Well, I guess, no, they're not the loser, they're the ones being, they're adding to that base. So, they're applying the losers against our winners, if that makes sense.
So, Corby and Buzz, this is Nathan here. I guess, so there's a process that you would go through to assess whether or not they're contributing actually to our TIF, or whether or not they are detracting from it.
Yes.
What is the time period to undergo that exercise, and if we undergo that before the end of the year, will that help us next year, or when does that assist?
It would help you the year, it'll help you in 2023. If we would need to approve a declaratory resolution before January 1st. That would take out these parcels that we're losing increment on, and then, as long as we don't have to be through the entire process, but the key date is now January 1st. It used to be March 1st several years ago, but now they moved it to January 1st. And so anything that we would identify and put in, the RDC could pass a declaratory resolution to eliminate certain parcels, as long as they did that before January 1st, and then presumably that would go through the normal channels with the Plan Commission and the council approvals, and then back to confirmatory for the RDC. That would potentially bolster our TIF revenue for pay 2023. 2022 is already done because that was established as of January 1, 2021.
Right. What is the anticipated cost on your end to look through the 600 or so parcels that are located within the TIF district?
You know, that part's not all that significant. I mean, we can probably do that in a day or two. Then you need to get the lawyers involved to create and we usually participate in that process.
That creates chaos.
On that time frame, so do you think we could?
I think we could get the declaratory approved before the end of the year. And then, in January, February, finish the process. There'll have to be you invite all the overlapping units to a meeting where you present a tax impact statement, and in this case, it would likely be that, there could be some minor impact on all the overlapping units by taking those losses and taking them out of the TIF area and pushing them back to the regular tax base, but that's spread over, however many taxing units there are. There's at least 4 or 5, I'm sure, with the schools and the libraries and the county and the township, and
how did these units happen to be on our listed in our TIF list here? Were they a one-time residential and then they've gone to business, or business and one residential?
Oftentimes when TIF areas are set up, they sort of draw a boundary on the map, and then they bring in all those parcels.
Okay, that's what I could kind of figure. Broad brush, okay, all these houses along here, all this property along here.
So, what happens if we take one out and then later they come back in and seek a variance to become a B2 or a...
Yeah, we would have to then do another declaratory resolution, but you'd start over with whatever the base is at that time. If that makes sense. You could bring them back in and establish a new base assessment date that would, if you see something that's going to happen positive on one of these parcels, if you think that something positive is going to happen, I'd probably just leave them in.
Right.
But if they're residential, and it's just pulling us down, residential can never help you unless it converts to commercial.
Well, we tried when, we had the TIF district, the condos down here on, Morris and 133rd, we looked to see if we could bring them in, and we were told that we couldn't bring them in because they didn't qualify to be in the TIF district. So I didn't know that residential was classified with our TIF district.
They don't qualify to capture, but condos, if they're more than 4 units, are they, well, I guess they're all individually owned though, aren't they?
Yes, about 60 of them.
Are they all homesteads? Would they be, are they second homes or are they homesteads?
Some are second homes and some people live in them.
Yeah.
I don't know what the percentage is.
Yeah, you kind of get into a fine line on condos, but like apartments are definitely capturable. If there's more than 4 units to a building, it's commercial by default, not, you know, and you can capture TIF on apartments, but condos, there gets to be some stickier rules on that. I'd have to, you know, we'd have to kind of look at that specifically and figure those out. But as a general rule, residential, unless you're doing a home ownership zone TIF, there are situations where you can TIF residential, but it's usually like we did some home ownership zone TIFs in Indianapolis where the city bought like 900 parcels of dilapidated real estate and leveled it, most of it, and then we established a home ownership zone TIF and did bonds that they could redo all the streets and all the sewers and everything, but I don't think I didn't see anything that dilapidated last time I was up in Cedar Lake. It all looked pretty good to me.
So, I guess Corby and Buzz, what are you suggesting? You need approval, you'd recommend this evening approval from us for your team to study the 600 or so that we have, and then come back with a recommendation to us within 30 days?
Yes, we can do that, yeah. And, like I say, that's, you know, you're probably looking at a couple $1,000 to do that part of it. And then, once you decide to move forward, we would have to do a tax impact statement and help the bond lawyers, or whoever you have do the TIF documents, have them create a new declaratory resolution, which is not a big deal, you know, to get through that phase. And if we get through that phase before January 1st, it's pretty simple to finish the rest of it after the first of the year. Because we've already, the key date is when the declaratory resolution is passed, and then, you know, we can identify all those parcels to take out.
Okay.
So that's probably, the first step would be just, you know, going through this list to see where the losers are, and, like I said, there's even some pretty small ones that must have had some, either appeals or whatever to lower their AD.
Well, along with that report, will there be some kind of a ballpark figure to this group as to what the savings would be to identify and remove those particular?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically, you know, whatever that loss is that's getting added back to the other winners, that's where, here's one right here, I don't have the address, but it looks residential, where they've got $180,000 loss. It went from had a base saving, $175,000, and now it's only worth $300. It must have tore the house down or something. Let me see which.
Yeah, Rick.
This doesn't have the address, but it looks like a husband and wife. they tore a house down or something, you know, that's,
Well, Buzz, if we had you, put together a proposal for the RDC, and put this on their November agenda for approval, does that still give you time? That, I believe, is November 15th. Does that give you time to do your work and get us prepared for adopting a declaratory resolution by the RDC's December meeting?
But it's
Yeah.
gotta go to the plan commission and the town council too, right?
Not the,
but not, we just need the declaratory before the end of the year.
yeah.
So, but yes, you're right, it has to go to all those other bodies, just like when you're creating a new district. Anytime you, take parcels out, you go through that same procedure.
That can be done in 2022. We just need to sign our declaratory resolution by January 1 of 2022, correct?
Correct,
But we
Yeah.
don't need to involve the other entities.
until after the first of the year, yeah.
Right. Yeah, okay. So can you get that to us, guys? Can you get a proposal for services that we can then vote on at our November meeting?
Yeah, in fact, we sort of have an agreement with the town, that we can do a separate one with RDC, but I'm guessing, you know, $2,500, we can come up with that list, I think. If you want to get us to jumpstart it right away.
Yeah, if you want to authorize that and then approve a formal agreement at your November meeting, we
Well, I'll make a motion, not to exceed $2,500 for the study of our TIF district there.
To look at the losses and come up with a list of potential, parcels to remove from the TIF area.
Right. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Mr. Niemeyer?
Yes, nobody's mentioned in this process, our town attorney has monitored this TIF district since its inception. So I know he has a ton of information on it. It might be worthwhile, for Buzz and Corby and Rick to, consult with Dave here, because he has done a lot of TIF analysis over the years and could probably tell you exactly, so we don't have to guess, what parcels are doing what and why it's happening, so.
That would be ideal, yeah. We could,
Yeah, Dave's office has been monitoring this since the TIF district was created, so I know he's got a lot of information on it.
He does, Andy, and
overall, I would say that we have a very successful TIF district, you know, just as an overall statement, but it looks like there's some potential to improve it a little bit by eliminating some of these loser parcels. And so,
right.
yeah, having somebody that really knows, you know, who's who on this list will be very helpful.
Dave and I had actually had a conversation about this briefly a couple of months ago, anticipating this report coming out. And at the time, Dave said he welcomed another review of the list of TIF properties to make sure that we're getting properly credited for what we have. And what Buzz is explaining to you is exactly the reason why we did the analysis back when I was in Dyer, because we had a ton of residential properties that were just like an anchor on on the TIF district at the time and causing some loss, and we were able to get rid of those and boost the revenues of the TIF district. So this is the kind of analysis we need to make, and I know, again, talking to Dave a couple of months ago, anticipating this coming out, he was looking forward to another set of eyes looking this over.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that, you got Dave to consult with on these too, because, some of these properties, you know, are obvious residential, but some of them, they might be held by an LLC or a trust or something, you know, and, having that knowledge right up front would be extremely valuable.
Okay. Well, very good, guys. We'll call for a roll call, please.
Mr. Spencer?
Yes.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Yes,
Mr. Burnham?
Yes.
Mr. Viss? Yes.
All right, Corby and Buzz, we've got approval here. and we will look forward to a report at our November meeting. Yes, as Mr. Niemeyer indicated, please work with Mr. Austin. I've seen those reports over the years, so I know he's got his finger on the pulse of what we've got here.
Yeah, what's the date of that November meeting? Just so I get it on my,
15th.
November 15th.
And I've got all Dave's information too, Buzz, so we're good there too.
perfect. Very good, well, thank you all, and, look forward to, getting better acquainted with this group.
Sounds good. Appreciate your work in advance.
Hey, my pleasure.
Next, we've got the SOD grant assessed values tracking metrics and ideas. Mr. Everly, was that something we were gonna use?
Right, we talked, in the minutes, it's mentioned here in the minutes how, we might want to look at tracking the impact of the, monies that the RDC has given out for facade grants, in the past to see what the payback is, so to speak, on those. And, I think Corby had a couple of thoughts that were, memorialized in the minutes as well. So it's a question of whether, well, one, are you going to continue that project, which is item actually number 4 on the agenda here. And if we are, do we want to try to somehow track those improvements to see if we have a payback in terms of increased property tax revenue in the TIF district? Corby, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, last time we spoke, we kind of just discussed, one thing we could do is, look at who's received these grants and try to, one way or another, compare the AV before and after. I don't know how much that would really teach us, though, because I think a lot of the value that you're getting in these grants is, it's intangible. You're adding to the community, but that would be one way just to kind of look at, who's receiving these grants. Are we seeing AV improvement and ultimately, property tax in return?
And this started, gentlemen, 2 years ago. Is this the second year we're in?
This will be the second full year.
Second full year. So even if a project, Corby, was completed last year at the end of 2020, when would we see the impact on, is that going to be 2022?
Yeah, I guess you'd have to see when.
It depends on if the assessor goes out, how often we reassess things.
Yeah, I guess it just depends if the assessor was out there and after the improvements have been made, so at least a full year after that, I guess, is when you'd ultimately see any, property tax on that increase in AV.
How much are these on grants? What's the maximum you give for a facade measure?
25,000.
25,000.
85,000?
25.
25.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Niemeyer.
it may be helpful for us to take a little bigger picture of this and do like a 5-year impact. Because of the fact that, you're gonna be doing kind of micro measurements if you're looking at this year over year, rather than looking at it in about 5-year increments, then we'll get a kind of a true scope of impact. If we're investing between 80 and 100,000 a year over 5 years, you can get a net AV increase number, and I don't think you need to overcomplicate it. You can multiply that net AV increase by the TIF tax rate, and you can come up with a number of TIF collections, but then you can come up with your value number too and keep it simple. But if we're gonna dive into the micro, we're gonna be pretty frustrated.
Well, if you could give us a list of the parcels that have received them, while we're going through this, we can try to take a look at those. Is there a parcel list of,
Yeah, there is.
facade.
Yeah.
That we could get our hands on, because that would be something while we're going through all this database anyway, we could try to, you know.
But I think Mr. Niemeyer's point's a good one, and Randy, are you saying from today's date to give a 5-year perspective moving forward, or to wait for a couple of years and then do a 5-year look back?
I would say from the start of the program, Nathan, just do it every 5 years. That way we're not guessing when the assessment,
Yeah.
we're not guessing on the trending, and we can just take a nice steady picture of this thing, and it gives us some measurables that are a little more significant than just trying to dig through all the little information that might be not available. And I think we'll end up frustrated with the results if we take a small picture.
Yeah. So, Randy, do you think it's too soon to do an assessment such as this?
I don't think it hurts to start really gathering that parcel list and finding each time we grant somebody a grant, maybe we find where their current assessed value is and make note of that as part of this process. And that way we're not having to go back through history, start over again when we take a 5-year picture, that maybe each time a grant is issued, we have some way of record keeping to say, okay, the current assessed value of this parcel is X, and then when we take the 5-year picture, we can just reference that number very easily.
Right, and I think what we've got here is a lot of folks have invested a substantial sum more than what we've given them. So in essence, the language that we're going to see over time is that our portion has contributed to X amount, not that we've caused, but it's contributed to X amount of AV growth.
Yeah, think about the law.
Yeah, I think that's a number you can get real time, Nathan, just based on what people are investing. But if we're gonna look at what the actual AV is, we gotta wait for an assessment.
Yeah. Mr. Thompson, what are your thoughts on that we would just start tracking now, setting a benchmark for where these folks are at the last 2 years? And that if we were to add year over year, we update that list, and then every couple of years we just take a look back?
Yeah, I think, kind of as Buzz was saying, as we go through the list, we can kind of go through the ones that have already been granted there, and it'll be hard to come up with just, the impact that the actual grant money is provided, but there would definitely be value in knowing that the community is growing, its AV as a whole, through these facade programs. I think that would be a good way to at least, present that there is some good that's coming out of this, the way that you guys would like to see.
Okay.
I think we've got most of that information already at hand. We can create this in a spreadsheet or whatever Corby and Buzz might need, but it's pretty readily available. So I think it'll be easy to put together, and then, like you say, do a 5-year look back and see what was the AV on this date and what is it 5 years later.
And it may be sort of intangible in that, fixing up the whole downtown is gonna maybe add more incentive for other development to occur downtown. So it may not always be a direct link to the parcel that got the $25,000 facade grant, but, it's probably gonna be a fair amount of subjectivity.
Right, well, and that's why I use the word contribute too, right? I mean, a lot of the folks that we've given money to, we've given 18, 25 grand to, but they're investing 100, 200, 300 into their development. So by no means can we say that our 25,000 caused an increase of value of 200 grand per parcel.
Yeah, I mean, getting rid of the eyesores is certainly value there, whether it translates into any higher.
But Nathan, that's what the Congressional Budget Office does, so why can't we do it?
I try to be a little bit more honest here at the local level, Mr. Niemeyer.
I copy that.
What should he say?
If Mr. Austin was here, he would be nodding his head with me that words matter. It's something we learned in the law school. All right, well, Corby and Buzz, we really appreciate your participation here this evening. And I think if Mr. Everly's office can coordinate with you with the information that we have in the next month, and then Ms. Abernathy, what I'd suggest is if you could put at the tail end of our agendas here, that perhaps we make October our eval month when it comes to facade grant programs. That'll allow us to routinely throughout the year be mindful of that for our office and whoever's on this commission moving forward.
It will help us set up for, as we set up our budget for the next year coming.
Yep, good. Anything else from the commission for Corby and for Buzz?
Let me ask you, Mr. Chairman, the last item under project updates is a financial analysis. I'm not certain what that was intended to be. I think we've covered that ground with this discussion.
I believe so, and somebody on the commission correct me if that understanding is incorrect.
No.
If that's correct, then we can let Corby and Buzz go.
I actually believe that next analysis was to try and figure out, you talking about figure out what we're gonna allocate for the facade grant for next year?
Yeah, that's next underneath new business, Mr. Niemeyer.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Okay, so.
Yeah, 'cause we talked about that a little bit, but I'll wait for the agenda item.
Okay. All right, Corby, Buzz, thank you much. We look forward to talking with you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Next, we've got facade grant funding 2022. Question here is whether or not to set aside monies for facade grant awards for next year. I guess from the chair's perspective, I would like to see the project ongoing, but I also have some hesitancy to set aside dollars, at least right now, recognizing and further understanding as of the last two meetings that if we do set aside those amounts, that may negatively impact our bonding capacity that we need to tap into in the next 6 months at the start of 2022. Mr. Everly is nodding his head.
Hey, Nathan?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Niemeyer.
Nathan, do you have your microphone turned on?
I do, yeah. Yep. Can you hear me?
I can hardly hear you. Is it pointed towards you? Is the main switch on or the green switch on?
Oh, green switch.
There he goes.
Yeah, there's a little button right on the microphone, right towards the base.
Gotcha.
That turns the green light on at the top.
All right, I turned the red one on.
We have to start all over now.
Yeah, there's a little button, right- there you go.
My reticence, Randy, was in setting aside dollars now, does that negatively impact our bonding capacity, which we need to be mindful of with the lake project and other projects early next year? So I set that as the stage for a dialogue on facade grant, setting aside dollars for next year. And I have been approached by several businesses that have wondered, are we setting aside dollars for next year because they have expressed interest? So what does the commission think?
So if I can start this discussion real quick, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to look at, as a way to make sure that we're kind of hitting the mark and not stopping the program we started, is just look at the money that we're on a yearly basis, allocating towards summer winds, subtract that from the facade grant program, but then add back in any tax collections that we're getting off of summer winds as kind of the delta. Do you get what I'm saying, Nathan?
Yeah, so you've got 38.5 there, which would make 51.5. I don't
61.5.
I try to avoid math, Mr. Everly. 61.5. Jen's laughing at me.
And what's our estimated tax collections off of that?
Yeah, and I'd have to get that pulled. I could estimate, what, 5 comes to mind, maybe?
We could get that information.
Yeah, I'd like to see us in that 70 to 75 range if possible,
Plus,
you know, just to keep a healthy number.
Plus, Randy, we could also even take into account perhaps the added revenue that we're deriving from the first year that we'll be gaining potentially next year with folks that did renovations in 2020 with their first round of facade grant program, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to do that, Nathan. You know, the start is finding that delta on the summer winds, and getting a good estimate of tax collections off of that project for this coming year. And then we can come up with a pretty nice baseline that we know that we can handle. And if, once the bonds are issued for the lake, we see that, okay, we have a little more flexibility than we thought, maybe we can make a slight adjustment to that.
Yeah. I think that's a really good thought, Randy. And Mr. Everly, is your office comfortable with giving us at least a rough number, or perhaps Jen's office, as to what that amount of contribution might be from a tax perspective from Summer Winds?
We can definitely look into that, Mr. Chairman.
No, I think that's a really good idea, and that'll start giving us some instant feedback as to what some of our contributions have been. Is there entertain a motion from the commission as to an amount for next year?
Amount for the total amount or amount of money that we're holding?
I'll make the motion. The motion I would make is that, for the facade grant program, the baseline we start at is the 61.5, and that based upon analysis of potential tax collections, that will increase the amount by those tax collections. And with the contingency of, once bonds are issued for the Lake Eco Restoration Project, if we have more flexibility, we add that flexibility back to the facade grant, and I'll pick a number not to exceed 80,000 for next year.
Ms. Abernathy, that was a lot of bands. You capture all that?
I'll make sure I get it all in.
All right, is there support for
You're
that
welcome.
motion? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, second by Doug. All right, discussion? I'm a big fan of that. We're already starting then to work into our facade grant funding, then a thought process annually to moving up or down based upon collected revenue, and I think that's a good move on our part.
So we're lowering.
Yeah, and Nathan, it'll also give us the flexibility that when we have a bigger TIF district and more money to collect, we can start to increase those ratios too and make a little more money available.
Right. So, Eric had a question here, but I'll try to answer it with a question and answer. So what Eric has asked is that we're lowering the amount that we're setting aside for the facade grant program, and I believe what Mr. Niemeyer was going for is we've already allotted $38.5 next year towards summer winds. And if we tack 100 onto that, then in essence, the bonding capacity next year is going to be viewed as us having 132.5 as outstanding liability. So what Randy has done is taken 100, basically minus 32.5, got us down to 61.5, suggesting we're going to have additional revenues most likely coming in from summer winds and some others, saying let's figure what those dollars are, and next year let's set aside a minimum amount of 61.5 plus up to $80,000, depending upon what additional tax revenue we have.
So the max next year would be $80,000 into.
As it stands right now, there was an additional and in there that I think Mr. Niemeyer threw in, that if we find out we don't need as much for the lake dredging project, that we reserve the right to go back and add more into it. Did I summarize that accurately, Mr. Niemeyer?
You got it, Nathan. The 80,000 was a not to exceed for this motion with the caveat that if we see that the bond proceeds and the interest rate and the tax revenues all align to where we can put a little more into the facade grant without affecting our ability to service debt and the bigger project we're investing in, then that's what we do.
Perfect. That work here? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Spencer?
Yes.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Burnham?
Yes.
Mr. Viss?
Yes. All right, that passes 4-0. Randy, thank you for that thought process. Appreciate it. Let's move into project.
Thank you.
Project updates. Clerk Treasurer, Jen, floor is yours.
Included in your packet is my monthly report to you all. So that's a very healthy cash balance as it sits right now. Really, your largest expenditures as of right now has been engineering as it relates to the 133rd and King project. You've had a couple of smaller roundabout reimbursements come back in. I anticipate a small settlement It will still be up there, maybe not as high as your spring settlement, but who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky and it'll surpass. We just wait and see, but I don't anticipate that coming until very tail end of December.
Okay. Do we have any major expenses coming, Ms. Sandberg, for the 133rd King Drive project?
I imagine that we should be receiving a pay request shortly, but I haven't seen anything yet. But they pretty much have wrapped up 130.
Right, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I just
I
haven't
would
seen the
think
pay
that
request.
we've seen, the majority of the expenses for that project already.
Okay.
This 150,000 in here, is that,
That's what we estimated, but we have not paid anything out yet because we have not had the pay requests for construction come in yet. To date, we've only had the construction engineering.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, remember that project was, 115,000 less the 27,000 that the school was putting in.
Right, and just got that accounted for up here.
Right.
Yep, okay,
All right.
very
So
good.
Maybe $85,000, $90,000 in construction costs.
And that's what we'll have to pay out.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I can
Mr. Chairman?
check.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Niemeyer.
One of the things that I think the RDC needs to start kind of implanting in our brains is we are going to really be beginning in earnest discussions about some major facility upgrades for the town of Cedar Lake, which will include a new public safety center as well as a new town hall. Now, those things are going to take several years to develop, but we are going to be laying the groundwork over the next several months to understand how we can make that work. The RDC is obviously going to be a part of that discussion. So these are some big things that are coming down the road here. And we also need to look at that first phase of 133rd that was done back in 2007 is going to soon be in need of at least a mill and resurface of that portion of road. So there's a couple things, there's some big ticket items that I think we've got to maybe put together a work session here once we've had some of these meetings with consultants to put our heads in the game, start to figure out a long-term strategy while before this TIF district sunset some years down the road.
I echo that sentiment, and I'm thinking it's always difficult to want to have a meeting around the holidays, but perhaps what we do instead is just a study session in December. I don't think we're going to need a full-blown meeting at that point. Maybe we will, based upon that one action item that we talked about earlier. But maybe we can dedicate the majority of our December meeting to just a work study session.
Yeah, December or January depends on how our meetings, our conference call meetings with our consultants go on the facilities project. We want to make sure we have substantial enough information so all of us can really start to consider the steps that we need to take, the financial mechanisms which will be at play, because these are game changer projects. There's an opportunity to use something called build, operate, transfer, which is a statutory financial mechanism that we're learning more about. So I think that as we learn, we need to make sure the RDC is having those discussions, and we're doing some study session work instead of just public action meetings, but because this group's going to be really important in the next 10 years of how this picture looks as far as the infrastructure and the facilities of the community.
Agreed. So I think at this point, we continue to build up the ammunition in our coffers and be prudent with how we expend it. So any other questions for Jen? Thank you, Ms. Sandberg. Appreciate it as always. One item that's not on project updates, but kudos to Mr. Everly and staff. I think the King Drive 133rd development was one of the smoothest that we have ever gone through. Orange cones went up. Suddenly it was in. We had phenomenal blacktop down, and it's a great looking project. So kudos to you and staff. Please pass that along. Thank you for your assistance in effectuating that project.
Happy to do so.
2, 3, and 4, I believe, 2 and 3, they involve Mr. Austin. He's not here this evening. 4 facade grant updates. Do we have anyone that's behind?
Margaret informed me today that we expect Cedar Lake Storage is going to be asking for an extension in November of their project. You granted 3 extensions last month,
Yeah.
so.
Just, complete disclosure, they are a client of mine, they asked me about that at a meeting last week. I request that they submit that request to Ms. Abernathy, anticipating that they would be asking for that. So if I forget next month, putting that on the record now. Any questions for facade grants?
Cedar Lake Storage is across the street from, the cement place?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep.
And they were making progress, all of a sudden, they, kind of dragging their feet.
Well, it's kind of tied up in the Plan Commission and the BZA. They seem like they don't want to pave the parking. And so we've struggled that. They came back and forth with other proposals, but we seem to want them to pave that, grounds before they start getting any business in there.
Oh, okay.
Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Light pole banners, any update there, Mr. Everly?
Yes, happy to report that the materials are all in. We heard from Mr. Adams, I believe it was Friday, that all of the brackets and banners are in and ready to be put up. So I would expect that those will get started probably in earnest next week.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Everly on that front? Financial analysis, we already covered. Ms. Abernathy, if you can put as well on the end of the agenda, work study session / large project review for our December meeting, that would be much appreciated. Anything else from the commission?
How's the fire department coming along?
Very well. Todd has reported that he's not going to be able to have the usual fire department open house because all the work won't be done. But I think he was anticipating sometime around Thanksgiving that it would be done, and he'd like to open it up for a possible open house at that time frame. So he's supposed to let us know. But he's been very pleased with the improvements over there at the firehouse, and of course he's expressed to you folks how much he appreciates what you've contributed to that, but he's very happy with what they've done over there.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
They're flying. Have you been in there yourself, Rick?
I have. I was in the upstairs while it was under construction, so it's hard to say, but the upstairs, I believe, is complete, and now they're working downstairs. So I haven't seen the completed project upstairs yet myself. So.
Okay.
But I know Todd's been very pleased with the progress and the way it's looking.
That's why they have all that stuff parked outside.
Okay. Mr. Carnahan, anything from the chamber or town council?
From the chamber, they had their 50th anniversary on October 8th, and it was a huge success, and it went very well. Strax bought a table, and State Farm bought a table, and had 94 people there.
Good.
Lighthouse.
Good.
Mr. Niemeyer, anything from town council?
Tomorrow night, we will be considering, possible nominations to fill the open slot on the RDC. I've had talks with a citizen who's very interested, who has knowledge of how all this works, so, we'll see if that's the town council's direction tomorrow night.
Very good.
Very good.
Anything else from the commission?
Margaret, you sent out a board commission application form to all of us via email?
That was,
Yeah, Margaret did that,
Margaret.
yes.
Margaret,
Yeah,
okay.
Margaret did that, yes.
Well, I filled mine out, so.
I
Due
can
next month,
take
right?
it for you if it's
All
on
right.
your desk.
Yeah, they're due by the end of November, yes.
And Rick and Bob, stay there, I want to talk to you guys after the meeting.
I'm sorry?
Stay there, I want to talk to you guys after the meeting.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.